Well, hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you. I'm very happy to welcome everybody on this new How We Document webinar series. Today, this is the first webinar of this How We Document series. And today we are going to focus on the starting design system, navigating the beginning. We are going to answer all the questions that you may ask and wonder about how to start your design system the best way possible. And our lovely speaker will be happy to answer all the questions that you may have. So yeah, feel free to join in the chat and say hello and say from where you come from. I'll let everybody join the webinar and I'll just have a few words as an introduction before we start. So if you haven't already, you can download our report about how we document. So this is a survey that we launched last year and end of last year, and we had like more than 500 people who answered this survey. They are very interesting and inspiring data and insight about how people document their design system, about team makeup, about tooling, and so much more. So yeah, feel free to get this report. If you haven't already, we also have a Slack community named Zeros, where you can be in touch with the Zero Height people and the Zero Height community. So feel free to join this this Slack. We are very nice. If you during the webinar, if you have any question or if you need assistance, feel free to ping Connie or Michelle in the chat or on Zeros directly. They'll be happy to help you. And I know that a lot of people are asking, but yeah, of course, we will share the recording of this webinar a few days after. So so don't worry about that. And finally, I'm sure that everyone here is very nice, caring, but it's always good to remind to everyone that we are in a caring environment. So yeah, just basically don't be a jerk, please. So as I mentioned, this is the first of many upcoming webinars to come. So we have more webinars to come in the upcoming weeks. The next one will be also the launching of a new series, which is called Amplify series, and it will be hosted by our design advocate, Michelle. It will be about honoring Black History Month. And if you are interested, you can already register on our social media. The next How We Document webinar is on the 1st March, and it will be about adapting design system, transitioning tools. You can register right now if you want for the next webinar. And then there will be a third webinar about how we document, which is scaling design system, and it will be focused on growing your team. So yeah, that's all for the introduction. And then it's time that I introduce our amazing speakers for today. I'm very happy and honored to have Lily Dart from Photobox and Julien Vanière from Sage to talk about starting design system today. Lily, do you want to start to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm very pleased to be here as well. Hello, everyone. Lovely to see everyone in the chat. So my name is Lily Dart. I am currently the design director for Albally Photobox, which is an e-commerce company that's pan-European. I have been a design leader of some kind for the last 10 years or so, and one of those roles, I was head of design systems for Lloyd's banking group. So that was the first design system that they had kind of across the bank. And it's the biggest bank in the UK, multi-brand. So it was quite large and complex to tackle.
Nice. Julien, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I'm Julien. I'm the Senior Design System Director for Sage. I'm working there for 15 years now, almost. So I'm an old guy in this company for sure. I'm driving a team of 12 people. I started as a web content specialist in a way, putting content there, and then I moved and grow into UX and UI. And then finally, 3 years ago now, we decided to create a full-time design system, I would say, because before it was just an initiative, and now it's a real dedicated team. That's me.
Awesome. So yeah, I have a couple of questions that I will ask to our speakers, and then for the other half of the webinar, we will try to answer your question from the chat directly. So I have a question for both of you, Lily and Julien, to start, and I'm curious to know, in your opinions, what is the first question or questions, if there are multiple, that you think you should ask before starting your design system? Things about, maybe it's about things you need to think about, things like that. Lily, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first question for me is always, are we going to be able to maintain this? So one of the conversations that I still have fairly frequently with people is that people from other organizations reach out and say, we're just starting on our design system journey. Can we talk a little bit about the experiences that you had? And what I often find is that the design system has started at the side of an organization with 2 or 3 people in a way that it doesn't have organizational buy-in yet. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, there are many good things start that way, but it can mean that you end up putting a lot of effort and a lot of emotional effort and attachment into something that never quite gets the kind of organizational buy-in that it needs to survive. And so really, my kind of first port of call is usually to encourage people to think about who are the stakeholders that you actually need involved in this to make it live long term. Do you have their engagement? Have you had conversations with them about whether or not they're supportive? And if you haven't, then how do we make sure that you don't kind of overinvest in something that isn't perhaps ready to live yet? And it's a tough conversation, right? Because we all, most organizations can get some sort of value from a design system, but not all of them can. Some organizations are too small for it to really be a useful activity, I would argue. So yeah, that's usually my starting point for, have you worked out how this is going to live a long, happy life? Or are we just hoping if we get started with it that it will work itself out? Because they very rarely work themselves out without some structure and planning around how they're going to be maintainable and invested in over time.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I know that maintaining a design system isn't an easy thing, and it's something that we tend to forget. So I think as a starting point it's a good starting question to ask yourself. Julien, do you have any question you ask before you're starting your design system?
Yep. So I agree with everything that Lily said. Definitely. This is something to take into consideration from the very, very early beginning, to not fall into this endless hole, I would say. But the very first question for me is just like for any other project, and it starts with why. Why are we doing this? Why are we investing there? And there is this standard process, which is to ask 3 times why, in order to eventually start to get the real answer. So why do we want to have a design system? Oh, in order to make it, to make something better. Okay, why do we want to make something better? Oh, because we are lacking confidence in this piece. But why are we lacking confidence in this piece? Oh, because we have. So that's the way you can start, I think, understanding really what is expected from stakeholders, and plan accordingly to that. Obviously, everything will change. Everything is constantly changing. So I would say your goals when you start the design system will evolve with that. I think we are transitioning into a new word with everything around AI. If we think about it, for example, ChatGPT mostly, but not only. So we definitely have to rethink and be able to improve and at pace. So yeah, I would start with why.
Interesting. So how to maintain and why. All right. And so I'm curious to know now that you have identified your first question. How I mean, regarding and based on your experiences with design system, how did you start your own design system? I'm sure that there are many ways, maybe by conducting interview or an audit or directly the libraries. I don't know. There are many ways to do it, but I feel like it's always interesting to have different point of view about it. Lily, how did you start it?
Yeah, so it was interesting when I joined the organization. So they did hire me in specifically to come and run the design system. They'd already decided that they wanted a design system. It was a fairly siloed decision, so it came from the design team. The engineering team wasn't properly involved in that decision, and so I was given this job without really the kind of stakeholder engagement in place to necessarily make it successful. But what the design team had done was hire an agency to help them to start the design system, which was pretty much doing an audit and then specifying the kind of first set of components that they wanted to use. There were two people who were kind of accountable within the business to look after that, and they were doing a great job, but what they were actually getting were about 5 requests a week from different teams, and we had like 10,000 engineers and designers, right? It was massive organization. Getting just requests all of the time going, could you add this to the design system? Could you add this to the design system? And it didn't exist, right? Yeah, there was no design system at that point. So a massive backlog was being held of all of these requests that just weren't going anywhere because the design system didn't exist. So the kind of very original baseline of it was an audit. What I actually did when I came in was to delete the entire backlog and start again with scope. So scope and which stakeholders are we going to target, who are in a, which stakeholders are in a place to be able to work with us. And there was wide amounts of variance in the tech stacks of different teams. So some of them were very modern, some of them were very out of date. And we would have really wanted to make a decision, and we did make a decision not to support them. And so really my question when I came in after we had an audit, it was good, it identified some good things, but also realistically for the scale of the bank we were working with, for the surface area of interfaces we had, there were so many components. There were so many different components that almost the audit wasn't that helpful in the end, because what we really needed to do was start with the question of scope, so that we could then go, now what do we want to do now that we've decided the scope? So I do think audits are really helpful in lots of different situations. They can be helpful to identify the similarities and similar pain points between different teams, for example, which can give you a good jump on stakeholder engagement. But in my case, I think it was slightly less helpful. And actually for me, the kind of baseline position was, what's the scope we're going to go after in V1 of this design system, and how do we make sure it doesn't get out of control and we don't get back to this massive backlog of stuff that just makes us feel helpless and unable to deliver on any of the things that we actually wanted to deliver on in the first place. Okay,
that's interesting. Yeah, good insights. Julien, do you have anything to share about how you started your design system at Sage?
So I was on a different position than Lily, because we had a design system already before I joined this piece, but it was an investment from different team members on their kind of spare time, trying to do a couple of things to in order to get to speed, etc. So this was a very valuable piece and a very valuable work that this team did. I was part of it when I was on one product, so I was participating and having one of my team members being involved in it. So this was one thing. So we had already something for a couple of years, and an intent more than a real full scope for sure. And the good thing for me is that my manager was coming from Intuit, and he was the one introducing design systems in Intuit. So definitely he knew the value, he understood that was the right thing to do. And I got the support from the CTO to go on that. So technically how we did started, we reviewed what was existing, we checked what was missing, we prioritized a couple of, or not couple, thousands of things, more than couple, thousands of things. And we've checked also with the previous team where they were willing to go, because they had already a lot of ideas and concepts. It's just that they were missing time in order to deliver. So this is how we started those things.
All right, thanks. And so about starting your design system, I'm curious to understand how long this starting phase is, and so when did you consider that you were not starting anymore, but actually building your design system? And maybe if you want to be more precise, how long can we expect someone to be in a starting phase, if it's easier to answer?
It's a tricky one to answer, I think, because I think it is dependent on the scale and scope and aspiration that you have for the design system, right? But I would say that it can, I don't think, even if you know the size and scale and scope of things that you're trying to establish, it's very dependent on your stakeholders and the other teams around you as to whether you are in starting phase or whether you are going at full speed. You can, as a separate design systems team, if you have the privilege of having a separate design systems team, build an entire design system and have no one use it. And arguably you're still in the starting phases if it's not rolled out and it's not in use. But you could have something that from an outside world looks like a fully fledged and well-developed design system. The proof is always in the pudding with a lot of these things, right? You have to get it in use and you have to iterate on it based on the feedback that you get, based on how many people in the organization can use it. That's the success criteria, really. So I don't think there's kind of a specific answer, but I suppose in the way that I tackled it, I tried to get us off the starting blocks and into something that felt like a kind of normal business as usual practices as soon as possible. But I did that by reducing the scope and being very clear about the scope that we were going to deliver in the first place. So we were very clear that in the first instance, all we were doing was form components. There were various different reasons for that, but we had thousands. It was a bank, right? We had thousands of forms. It was a very useful and reusable place to start, while also being mostly a very simple set of components. But we were very specific that that was the scope that we were going after, which meant we could build them fairly quickly, and it meant that we could get into a practice of lots of people using them fairly quickly, and we did. And from there, you kind of get into a routine where you are taking requests, you are adding new things, you are doing changes, you're doing breaking changes. You have to mature around how do you manage breaking changes when you've got 10 different teams using your design system. And for me, I think when we get into that scale of I've got enough people using it that I have to be very careful about what I release and when. That really feels like maturity for me, assuming that you're not breaking things every time you do a release. And I think how fast you get there really depends on, do you consider that your design system is a design system after 3 components if those 3 components are in use in 10 teams, or do you need a 20 component design system in use with at least 1 team before you consider it the first version complete? I think a lot of it depends on how you scope it and what you define success looks like.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good point, and I feel like adoption is a whole different topic, but it's very related about how it can help you start your design system on good and solid foundation and make it grow later. Yeah. Julien, maybe do you want maybe to share any insights?
Yeah, so on my end, I'll be transparent. I think that we are mature enough, and we finished the starting phase kind of this month, okay, after 3 years. So I have different things to show that. The first thing is that now we will low a bit more down our investment on components in order to be more focused on patterns. So this is, at least for me, this is how things should come. You should have a strong components that are good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect, but good enough to support teams so that they can adopt it, as you just said. And then being able to create above that UX patterns that will apply constantly everywhere. So this is why I would say that. And I think that there is another maybe easier way in a way to know if you think that you've finished your starting phase. As a former designer, I don't want to show anything that is not really, I don't say fully polished, but at least a bare minimum. And our design system is not public for now, but it will be public. And I think that when you start thinking that you are happy to go public, even if not everything is absolutely perfect for sure, but when you're ready in your head, say, this is a moment that now I consider we can go public, then I think that this is the moment where you've finished your starting phase. But it's not finishing the design system. It's a never, never, never ending story for sure.
Of course, yeah. So from the How We Document report, there's something interesting that we noticed is that we learned that young design systems often start including tokens, governance, and documentation early on. So I'm asking, what should people work on first? Can all the things be worked on? Can all the things be worked on at the same time, in your opinion, or do you need to prioritize specific patterns or components? Yeah, what do you think, Lily?
I think so. I think it's a little bit variable, but I would say the thing that is important to start with is, do you know what everything will look like when it is all together? So one of the mistakes that I've seen people make is going in component by component. So obviously you would have a starting, color palette and, typography and some of the kind of baseline things like that, maybe a grid. But what I've seen is people jump straight from that into, and now we're going to design our buttons. And so you then start to build up a design system from sort of the buttons upwards, rather than going, what is this holistically supposed to look like, and then unpacking it. And maybe some of the kind of atomic design thinking is a little bit to blame for some of this. It almost positions, I don't think that was Brad Frost's intent, but I think in some ways we've internalized that we need to start with the smallest thing first. And actually, I'd argue we need to start with the biggest thing first and then unpack it down into the small things that we want to represent. So for me, I think if you start with that kind of North Star of what are we trying to get it to look like? How are we trying to get it to behave? What are the kind of key principles of our experience? Then you can decide what you need to support that. So do you need documentation, or actually do you need example pages? How big of a deal is content for you in your organization? And would content, documentation and tone of voice be a really important part of making this interface successful? So one example might be, if you've got a very text heavy interface, then you want to make sure that you're thinking about tone of voice in terms of that overall experience. So I think it's variable again on the goals of the organization and what you're trying to achieve with the design system. But for me, the thing you have to start with is, what do you want it to eventually look and feel like, and what do you want the experience to be on a high level, even if that's a bit sketchy, even if you don't have all the details. I'm not saying go and sort of redesign an entire website, but there will be changes most likely that you want to make with your design system. I've seen very few people go, we've already got the perfect UI and we just want to document that in our design system. Usually we're saying, actually, we want to evolve our UI through the design system, in which case you have to know what it is you're aiming for. So when you have that, you can then go, well, what is the guidance? And it's thinking about your internal staff as users of an internal product. And I have mixed feelings about whether or not they are internal products when we talk about design systems. I personally believe that they are. And you have to think about the people that are going to come and use them as internal users. So what tools do they need to be successful in achieving the vision that you are describing? And that will be variable, again, depending on the goal. But yes, for me, it's where are we going? And then we can work out what tools we need to be able to support that.
All right. Julien, any thoughts about it?
What can I add? Because it's a lot. Yeah, you can start differently. So I don't really know what I can bring more than what you said, Lily. To be honest,
that's fine too.
Yeah, no. So yeah, I'm aligned with what you said.
Perfect. If today you had, to start over, you have to start your design system over, is there something that you would do differently, and why? Maybe Julien, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, so there are a few things that would change. For example, so again, this is for my use case. I'm looking at some of the questions with the design tokens and having the code, etc. On our end at Sage, we don't have any code. We have design tokens, but we don't have any code for the components because we are serving way too many SDKs in order to have the code there. But what I would do a bit differently is what Lily alluded to regarding the fact that we have to, when you start creating a design system, you have to think about the full scope, the full view. You can do a perfect component, absolutely perfect. Your colleague, you can do exactly the same thing. Both of them really brilliant. You put them together in a form, you get nothing. It's absolutely shitty. Because you were not working together, or because you were not thinking that at the end you are not delivering a component, you are delivering an experience. And this is where it makes a lot of difference. And I think that my team was very efficient on that, but still, what I would do if I was having at this moment a front-end resource also is maybe trying to develop a fake app, having all the design system components. At the beginning, obviously, there will be mostly, just grayish thing, just like a mock-up thing, wireframe. And all the components that we start to build on would be with those new components. So let's say I have an interface just like Gmail, and I don't have the menu for the moment. Okay, but I have the header. So I will put the header. The rest, I know that I need a navigation, I need that, I need a button, etc. This will be great. And then step by step, you start challenging the different things so that you don't end up with something like after, I don't know, 10 months or weeks of work regarding the scale, etc. You put everything and you discover that, ta-da, this is not working. So this is eventually something that could be a usable and useful way of thinking, I would say, for every team. Yeah, that's mostly that, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you, I feel. Lily, what do you think?
So I think the big thing that I would have done differently if I could go back in time was really to think about how I could have connected the design system as a proposition into the organizational vision and goals better than I did at the time. So at the time we had a kind of contextual cultural issue, which was that there had been previous internal tools before. There weren't design systems, but they were previous internal tools that had been sort of internally branded and promoted, and in some cases forced onto teams. And as a result, internal tools had a very poor reputation. because a lot of teams had bad experiences with them. And so we made a decision early on to go as fancy and as least banky with the sort of branding of the design system, and to go quite branded with it early on, because we wanted it to feel like it was something that was different. And that landed quite well in some situations, but after a little while we started getting feedback that was along the lines of, I didn't know that you were part of the bank, and actually I didn't trust you as a result of that immediately, because I thought you were trying to sell me something. You know, you're some kind of internal, some kind of product that we'd been to the organization and you were trying to promote it. And I do think that, I also just think when I'm kind of thinking about the leaders I was working with at the time, they probably would have been able to buy into it and sort of represent it as something they were supporting a little bit easier if it was something that was more recognizably banky, or, you know, kind of one of the bank brands that we were working with. So actually what I probably would have done is say, what are some of the key words, themes in our strategies, goals that we've got to, and how do I kind of label and brand it around those concepts, rather than something that is purely nice for designers and engineers and design system-y feeling. And that is something that it's a lesson I've really taken sort of forward in the rest of my career, to go, actually, how do I, that's always a sensible thing to do because it makes it feel embedded in the organization, and how do I make sure I do that going forward. So it was a really useful lesson for me to learn, but it was really one of the big things where I go, how do we make this, it's important to make it feel part of the organization, an organizational initiative, because so few people know what a design system is in the first place, and even less than that care, to be honest. So the more you can make it feel like a kind of bona fide piece of the furniture in an organization, I think the more credibility you can build for yourself in many different places. But again, the scale I was working at was massive, across thousands of people. So things like how well you brand your design system is definitely a consideration that is something you worry about more at scale than in a smaller organization.
Yeah, it's very interesting and inspiring. I have one last question before we go to the audience questions. In your opinion, what is the most important advice that you would give to someone who would like to start a design system? I feel like it's a simple one, but also it could be, you know, anything. Who want to start?
I'll wrap this one up if that's okay. So for me, I give this advice a lot. It's basically, don't expect too much too fast. If you do expect too much too fast, you will burn yourself out pretty quickly. And I see this frustration in a lot of people when I speak to them when they're trying to get a design system kicked off. It's, you know, I think sometimes we come at this from an angle which is, of course this is valuable, of course this is useful, why wouldn't people want to do it? And that is reasonable from some perspectives, but in other perspectives, actually, if I look at this from a product manager in the business's perspective, they've got 25 other things that they are caring about and worrying about, and the design system is barely a blip on any of that. And so how you kind of start to address this problem, the headspace you come into this problem solving with is quite important. And I speak from sort of particular experience, not just in design systems, but a lot of my background is digital transformation. It's big organizational change. And a design system is organizational change, right? We are asking people, and often quite large teams of people, to fundamentally change their ways of working and to change the dependencies that they have within the organization, to change how and where they invest in the parts of the product that they are responsible for. It is quite a large change culturally, as well as when it comes to kind of the basic practical tooling. And that takes years. You know, I'm not surprised that Julien's saying it's kind of 3 years and he's now feeling like we're getting to a point of maturity with it. It takes years. And so I think it's very tempting when we see very shiny kind of, demos of other people's design systems to go, hey, I could put that together in 6 months and then that would be great. You're not going to get it done in 6 months. You will get it done in 3 years if you're lucky, and that will be the beginning of the journey. And so knowing that going in is very important, because otherwise within 8 months, you'll be feeling frustrated and you'll stop or quit or leave. And you'll do that feeling pretty burnt out as a result, because it will feel like people aren't listening to you. So it's not happy advice, but just be really mindful, I suppose, of the mindset that you're going in with and the expectations that you have around how fast this change is going to happen and how much people are going to want to invest in it.
Cool. Thank you for this answer. What about you, Julien? What advice would you give?
So I will go definitely on what Lily just said. Maybe it's because also of the scale of the companies in which we work together. Sage is 11,000 employees and more than 100 products. So as you can imagine, it's a lot. So definitely we have a lot of things to consider. My best advice is something that at least I hope, is something that I'm saying to my team almost on a daily basis, which is true for a lot of designers, especially, a bit less for developers, but clearly for designers. I ask them to think about the Pareto law. So for the ones that don't know the Pareto law, it's the 80-20 rule also, it's named like that. And it means basically that you can achieve 80% of your commitment by investing 20% of your time, and the last 20% of your time, the last 20% of your project will cost you 80%. So what I'm always saying to my team is be careful. It's clearly the fact that I don't want my team to be absolutely focused on delivering something perfect everywhere, etc. When we are so much into the details that even sometimes the designers on the product will not notice that, but on the or they may after some time. But the value here will be limited compared to the fact that they are in need of new components or new patterns, etc. So we have to be very careful here. And there is I don't remember who said that, but it's continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. And this is a key thing to me. So we have to be careful. And as Lily said, do not put neither too much pressure on your shoulders, like, oh, we have to do this and this and that. And yeah, of course we can make it because we are faster and stronger than anyone else around the world. And when you will start to dig on that, you will start to see that, oh yeah, but I have to consider this. Oh, but now that we've changed the dropdown, then we have to consider that. Oh, but now that we've changed also the content and the tone of voice, this is not relying anymore, or the values of the companies that can have an impact on that, or the branding. So do not expect that everything will be perfect. So 80-20 is good enough, I think, to start with. That would be my best advice.
Awesome. Very, very cool. We have a lot of questions from the audience. There's an interesting one about adoption, because I feel like, it's very related about starting your design system, how you can, get adoption. And as both of you have worked on, very large company, I think, it's interesting to, share your experiences about, adoption when it comes to big organization. And there is a question from Kelly asking if you have any tips on communication when it comes to very large and global team, because they are struggling right now with adoption and contribution to fall back into their design system, and ensuring that everyone has insights into updates. I think, yeah, so the main point is about, communication with global and very large team.
I can go. Okay. So it's a very good question. I think you say it's Kelly, if I don't say anything stupid, right? So it's a very good question, Kelly. On my side, on my team, we try to have perfect adoption of everything and having, measures and reports that we can show, like, oh, we've got this and achieved that. But it's taking a lot of time in order to do those reports. And to be honest, I'm privileged, surely, also in my company, but I just thought that we were not getting a lot of value from that, or enough value compared to the things that we were in need to deliver. So what I did is I've created something that is called the Extended Design System Team. So it's all the leaders of all the products and services that we have in the company. We're meeting every 2 weeks with my team. We talk about the different proposals, the different patterns, the different needs, and proposals coming from their teams also, because the design system at Sage is not something monolithic that comes from us and the others have to apply. It's also they have to propose things. They can challenge us. They can come with new ideas and concepts, etc. So it's building trust. I think that is the most important, more than showing, oh, you know what, the adoption is at this and that. You will not get any adoption if people, developers and designers, don't trust you. Don't trust that you're doing the right thing, that you are delivering value. If they still think that what you're doing is not good, they will do whatever they can to not take anything coming from you. As soon as you start to get confidence and trust, then they start to think about, okay, I understand the intent. I may not be very happy with this component, but I got the feeling that they are going in the right direction and they are here to support us. So yeah, this is what we're doing at Sage.
I think that's like, trust is definitely one of the biggest things, and that is hard in a large organization because you're never going to be able to have a personal relationship with everyone. I suppose there were 2 additional things that I would add that we did. One of them was recognizing, and this was particularly important for the bank I was in because it was quite male dominated, and very engineering dominated. I had to recognize that me and my team were not always the right advocates for ourselves. And I did a lot of work finding the mostly male engineers who would go and speak on our behalf about why they should be engaging with us, why other teams and other teams of engineering leaders should be engaging with us and building trust with us, why they should be supporting us. And that really helped to kind of get that next layer outwards of stakeholders that we could build relationships with. We didn't manage to build relationships with everyone. And I kind of got to a key tipping point of saying, we've built enough relationships with enough people that we are deployed in sort of 10, 12 teams, which is a really big achievement. And now actually I'm going to go after trying to bake it into governance. So it being some level of requirement that you either have to use the design system or you have to give a good reason as to why you can't use it. That might be like, actually, we're not supporting your code because it's massively out of date. So I did tip a little bit from like, how do we build trust into going, the organization is too big and I'm not always credible for various different reasons. So how do we then move into making it part of a formal structure, because I can't have a personal relationship with everyone. But the other thing I did that was really helpful was I developed with the team what we called proto personas for our internal stakeholders, basically. So we had one for engineers, we had one for product managers, we had one for the designers, and we had a general set of kind of what are the tools they're using, what are the needs that they have, what are the general experiences they have around doing their jobs in the organization. And then we had specific communications decks and key messages that we wanted them to take away when we spoke to them. And they were different for each of those 3 groups. And it was really important because if we went to the product managers and started talking to them like they were designers, they would switch off in 30 seconds and not want to engage with us again because they were very time poor. And so actually really doing, some work to unpack what were the messages that landed with them most effectively. And for them, it was speed, it was saved money. That wasn't what the designers wanted to hear. They didn't care about it, quite understandably. And so unpacking the differences between some of those messages and working out where their particular pain points would be allowed us to do a kind of quite professional comms job with them to make sure that when we did have opportunities to speak, people listened and they felt like we were hearing them and their problems as well.
Cool. Yeah, well, I like with both of your answers is about the trust aspect, but most of all the human aspect. And I like to say that design system, we talk a lot about tooling and process for design system, but in the end, I always think that design system are all about humans, and it's it's made by humans and for humans, and it's maybe the most difficult part of the design system in the end. Not so much about the code or the Figma libraries or things like that. It's all about developing the trust and collaboration, things like that. I have another question that is interesting from Trevor. It's more about an engineering question. Trevor asks, does anyone have experience started a design system without a direct or dedicated engineering support? And if so, what was your approach? I'm currently attempting to get things started, but from within product squads. So whenever an engineer has time, things like that. I don't know if any one of you have something to share about this.
I don't know if Julien has slightly more relevant experience on this. I didn't have an engineer when I started. I just went and got one as soon as possible by building relationships. I basically said you can have some free design if you give me an engineer. And that worked out really well for the stakeholders I was dealing with. But I set myself up as a product team as quickly as possible with dedicated engineers, and then built on it from there, because I do think it's a tricky position to start from. But Julien, I don't know if you've had a different type of experience.
Yeah, so on our end, we started without an engineer. We had an engineer after a year. Again, what is important? So it really depends again of the type of company in which you are. If you are on a small company or with just one product, etc., I would definitely engage you or push you, I would say, to have a front-end engineer from the beginning. On our end, when you are on large-scale companies, we know that we will not be able to deliver anything valuable before some months. And when you have a developer, it's just like a designer, but you have to feed him or her, And if you have very basic things to do, then your developer will not, feel very happy and will not be invested so much, because you have nothing to give to this person. So it really depends on what is your approach. Are you willing to build your own dedicated code with a new code base or whatever? Is it to use the one that exists? Are you serving multiple code bases, just like me? It depends, but it's not, for me, it's not a mandatory thing. On the other end, I may be a bit different from other teams. I started with a content writer from the very first day, a content writer. And this was very, very crucial for me. I think that at the beginning, it was not 100% understood. But after that, I can tell you that now no one could imagine not having Emma on the team with us. And even her, she was at the beginning telling me, but I don't really know what I will do after 1 month. It will be enough. And she's here for 3 years. And she has a lot on her scope.
All right. There's another question about contribution that I think is interesting, because it helps a lot with starting your design system. And this one is from Hunter. What is the best practice for multiple teams contributing to the design system? So basically, I think it's about the contribution model. And I feel like both of you have probably many things to say about that.
I'm going to start by recommending Amy Hoop's talks on this. So Amy did a lot of work when she was working in the UK government design system team, on making contributions work. And then she's kind of come full circle a little bit to go, actually, it's really hard to make them work. So there's an evolution, if you kind of watch back on various talks that she's done in the last 2-3 years, there's an evolution of her thinking around it. And I think I've not come across anyone who's thought about contribution more than Amy. I honestly, I didn't do it very much with my team, because we'd started from that position of having this overwhelming backlog of misshapen requests that were very hard to turn into anything meaningful. And we did then set up a process later on for people to be able to contribute with but either you go in one of two directions, right? Either you say, here is the process that allows you to contribute things that are roughly design system ready. So you say, these are the things you need to think about when you're adding something for a design system rather than the bit that you need in your interface right now. Or you say, give us the bit that you want in your interface right now, and then you risk having to change almost all of it by the time that it's ready to go in the design system. And I don't think there's much winning in between those two models. I think it is organizationally contextual. I think how aligned your teams are in the first place, how similar the problems are that they are trying to solve are important, as to whether or not the model can work successfully. And I think what stage of evolution you're in with your design system, how big your design system team is, how much they can act like coaches for other teams to kind of get things design system ready. All of those things are really important. And in the time that I was running the design system team, and it's still running now since I've left, but in the time I was running it, really just didn't feel like the right time to be investing in those things, because all of the teams were in such different shapes of maturity and shapes of product progression, right? So one team wanted a very refined component to show complicated things on maps, and then another team would be like, I just need this different button variant, can I have that please? So what we ended up doing was really kind of focusing on going, here is what we would recommend so that you can build your own things that look like they match with the design system. Let us know, and we'll do a kind of run up every 3-4 months to see whether or not people are fundamentally building the same things over and over again. We'll then add that to the main backlog, and we'll tackle that with your collaboration later on. But I positioned the team very much in charge of kind of what went in, and in charge of overseeing quality standards for the model of how we do contribution. But of course, that then leaves a lot of kind of the rest of the team members feeling like they're not bought into the design system in the way that you'd like them to be. It's a really, really difficult problem to solve. I don't think I've seen anyone solve it in a particularly good way. I think there's always compromises. But if you want to hear all of the gory details and some of the best ideas I've ever heard, then definitely check out some of Amy Hoop's talks.
Yeah, I agree. Amy is great. And Julien, you mentioned earlier about external teams, something like that with your design system. Is it a way for your contribution model or not?
Yeah, so I call that extended team. So I have my core team and then the extended team, so that they also feel part of the design system, which again, for building trust, as we discussed before, is important. So regarding the contribution model, we cannot cope, and I think it's the same for Lily, we cannot cope with all the needs coming from everyone, etc. So we had to put some rules. The thing is, if something can be valuable for multiple products, then it becomes a potential candidate for design system. If it's very specific for your product, your solution, then what we can do is recommending you to, of course, follow the design system rules that we have in general, the colors, the naming, the blah, blah, blah. And we can give you, which is not official, but I have to work on that, but to kind of stamp the things like, okay, design system approved, but it will not go into the design system in front of everyone, I would say. It's more that you have the approval, so your developers can go with that, because on some teams, if it's not on the design system, they don't even start coding. This is the level of relationship where we are. Some others, they don't care. So we still have to build that. So yeah, I think that this is an important piece. We need to make sure that the collaboration is going on both ends, that we can rely on them, that they can rely on us, and that we are making only the things that are valuable and being as less biased as possible. Most of my team is coming from the medium segment, which is with heavy power users, when the previous design system team that was, as I said, not a real one, they are all coming from small. So we have a lot of materials coming from small when we are more from the medium segment, and so there are still some fights because it's not rich enough for the medium segment, etc. So we have to cope with that. But yeah, contribution is very important, and it's a never-ending story. And this is surely one of the biggest challenges that you can have as a leader on a design system. Clearly that.
Cool. We still have a lot of questions from the audience, but we only have a few minutes left. So there's one question from Jason that I would like to conclude with. Jason asks, also curious about any example of when design system is not adopted or has had a lot of trouble being adopted. What were the reasons for this, and were any changes made to help adoption? Lily, maybe you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think once you have got, it depends a little bit on how your design system is set up, but from my experience, once code was in someone's project or product, the biggest hurdle was over because you had a relationship with them. You have to set up communications channels to be able to make that work. So when are you going to make changes and updates? You know, they want to know what your roadmap is. You know, once you've kind of gotten over that hurdle of getting the first few lines of code in, there is always a chance that people can sort of drop off from there. But broadly, the biggest hurdle is over, and you've got a doorway to a relationship. I think, as you were saying earlier, Jules, so much of this is about humans and human relationships. That once you've kind of got that doorway in, most of the time you can make something work, and they can, you know, express their concerns and request things. So I think it's more about adoption problems, in my experience, have been more about either kind of hard things. So by hard things, I mean like technical stuff, like, you know, we are using one version of a framework and the teams are using a different version of a framework and we aren't currently supporting it, or we would have to change the way that we are delivering the code or something else for them to be able to use it. So things that are kind of practical blockers. And in some cases, there are changes that you should be making in those situations. So if you look across 10 product teams and only 3 of the product teams would actually meaningfully be able to use your design system, then absolutely you should be making technical changes to be able to make that better supported. And in some cases, you just decide you're not going to do that, right? So for me, there were certain standards that I just was not going to kind of do backwards compatibility with, because, you know, we were moving forward over time and spending a lot of time trying to support things that were historical, that at some point would be made defunct and replaced with something new. Even if that was 5 years in the future, it wasn't worth doing some of that investment. And so we made a very conscious decision not to support it. So some of the blockers are like technical stuff like that. The other ones tend to be cultural ones. You know, they are about maybe your lead engineer and the lead engineer of this product team just have fundamental differences on how they think good coding should happen or what it looks like, right? There's a lot of that I had to deal with about what is good practice and what is not good practice, and that's a cultural thing, right? That's a set of decisions, and I think that's where Julien's model of kind of having a distributed network of people is really helpful, because then you can say that the distributed network of people made some of these decisions, not one individual, and that's how you get around some of the cultural problems there. But it is also things like, you know, the designers didn't like it. We had no design standards in the bank, really, nothing that was consistently used. And even though that caused the designers a lot of pain, there were some designers that really didn't like the fact that they were having control taken away from them, even though we were making a lot of their lives easier by going, here is all of your documentation in one place, here are the rules that you need to use, you don't need to go and ask 10 people about whether or not this is the right thing. But it did, in some cases, give them less control about what they output, and they were upset about that. And that's not something that we can fix the design system to be better at, because the whole point is to give them a little bit less control in some of those situations, because the amount of control and personality that they were bringing into those interfaces were creating a poorer experience for customers overall when you looked at everything sat together. You know, this designer's work next to this designer's work next to this designer's work. So I think, there are a variety of different problems that you might have with adoption, but I think starting with, is this a technical problem or is this a cultural problem, is probably the first place to take a look at it, and then ask yourself whether or not you actually really want to support those things. In some cases, it's right to say that you won't make changes to support them, and in some cases, you do need to.
All right, and I remember that you have a great talk about design system, reflecting your culture. Julien, is there anything you would like to add before we conclude?
I think we have 5 seconds to conclude, so that might not work. I can go. I can try to go pretty fast.
Yeah, go.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that. Okay. Now I've lost my mind. Sorry. Can you just repeat the question? It will come back.
It's about when you have issues with your design system being adopted. What was the reason for this, and what changes could help for adoption?
Okay, thank you. Sorry. So it's again it's a bit different. So I have just one experience. I only implemented design systems at Sage, so I cannot talk about anything else. But at Sage, we have some failure, I would say, on some products compared to others. This can be because of people. Because of culture, as Lily said, absolutely fully agree with that. At Sage, we've decided also to make something with the team. We have some old technology products, we have some new technology products, we have future products, so we all know that. And so for the old technologies, what we did is to say that we've delivered guidelines for MVP. So as an MVP, you have to do this, 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 and that. Whatever you do more is great. Thanks for your investment, but it's not required. For this kind of products, it's this, 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 and that's fine. For all the latest SaaS cloud products, everything or nothing in a way. So this was one way. A very positive thing on our end, even if it cost my team a lot of work and to redo many things, is that Sage has changed very, very heavily the brand a year ago. So this was a huge, huge work. But on the other end, as it was everywhere, people, all the teams were that they had to do something for their products. They cannot keep the old logo, which was absolutely different from previous ones, the new colors, the new things, etc. So because of that, they were in need of someone explaining them what to do on their product. And the only place where they can find it is not on the brand portal, it's on the design system. So they had to come to us to understand what was expected. This is where we started with the MVP and this kind of stuff. And so this is where you can see a valuable progression of the adoption. So I hope for all of you guys that your company can just move forward with rebranding, because it can help, it will push, make some efforts for them to do that and adopt the design system.
But yeah, I guess you're right. It's a good opportunity. It's like, some kind of a Trojan horse, to get people into your design system. We're away of time a little. Thank you, both of you, for answering all our questions for our first How We Document webinar. We have another How We Document webinar coming on the 1st March. You have the link if you want to register. I guess that's all. I also would like to thank all of the attendees for joining us for this webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out directly on our Slack or on social media. And have a great day or evening for everyone, and hope to see you soon. Thank you, everyone.